This is Recommendations on Beekeeping Styles. Thank you for watching. I am Kevin England. In this session, we will introduce the concept of local as it pertains to beekeeping. This lesson will have a bit of focus on how local weather, climates, and conditions influence your beekeeping. We'll also touch upon how some cultural influences steer beekeeping impressions and how local should take precedence over your actions. Your yard, your neighborhood, your community, your region, and to some extent your state all exert influence as to what one might think of as a local approach. Let's consider that what you do with your bees on any given day is predicated by the weather. As you watch the weather forecast on the news, they tell you the temp, and it's going to be a sunny day and maybe how much wind you're going to have, among other things. In a general sense, this is supposed to apply for you as you plan your day. We all know that the forecasts are generalizations and that there is a very good chance that on occasions where you are, things are meaningfully different between what they said and what is on the other side of your front door. Also, you can observe that what grows in your yard and in the yards of your neighbors is likely different from what you might see in another part of the state. On this slide is a list of just some of the factors that have an impact on what you see when you step outside the door. As you come to work with bees, you'll see that the conditions of the day have an immense impact on how the bees behave. Since we are based in New Jersey, we'll use New Jersey as a jump-off point to illustrate some of the points of this presentation. The topology of New Jersey is a good example for diversity. The highlands of the mountains to the northwest side of the state, the flat areas of Burlington County just east of Philadelphia, the weather influences by the Delaware Bay over the southern tip of the state, and how that moisture influences weather patterns across the state right up to New York City. Then you have the New Jersey Pine Barrens, the water tables there, and the way that it holds heat due to its sandy soils. Topology changes in the land are just one factor that have significant impact on your region, and when looking at it from a macro standpoint, even in your own neighborhood. Our weather at our home is different from our beekeeping neighbors at the end of our street because, well, we're in a hollow that holds a lot more moisture. One thing that localization changes is forage. What you have available from your property is very different from the beekeeper in another part of the state and maybe even in your own county. This opening is to illustrate that you have to know the differences of your apiary and use your experience to adjust for management practices. Broad instructions, like some that you get from this program, for example, have to be taken with consideration. We often encourage our beekeepers to connect with other beekeepers right in your region and locally through associations. Part of this is because beekeepers like to talk about weather and seasons and how it influences the management practices for what they consider local. The biology of the bees is very much tied to the weather. In a use case, let's talk about a morning where it's becoming light. The bees are going to fly in cold periods. They can fly in cold weather. And biologically, they can overcome the cold to get some work done. They'll have to warm up their flight muscles to fly, and their opportunity to attempt that might be suitable on a sunny day in your yard, but not when it's cool and damp and just below the threshold for them. If it's not evident by now, weather, especially what is going on outside your door, and more specifically in your yard, is a key factor. And if you have a bright, sunny, warm place, it might work for you. But if you're in a low-lying area in the woods, then maybe your bees are not going to fly that morning. Again, local really matters when it comes to how the bees are going to operate biologically. Beekeepers are weather watchers. In time, you will come to recognize that you'll look at the weather for the day, for the week, for the trends. The planning of beekeeping activities is almost completely tied to the weather forecast and what the forage looks like outside your door, and it would serve you very well to become one with the weather and the forage for your bees. Do it for your own right and avoid letting beekeepers on Facebook tell you what the weather's doing and how it's going to impact your bees and what you should be doing. 9 times out of 10, they probably have it wrong. And they're telling you about things that apply to their local area, and their weather is going to vary from yours. Now, you could use other reports to prompt you to evaluate what you have going on locally, but do your own assessments and develop your own weather and forage acumen. That's what it means to be local. To elaborate on the point, one of the key reasons to do this is because your weather is unique. Your forage is unique. If you live in the hills and mountains of North Jersey and are surrounded by heavily wooded areas, what business does a beekeeper on the Jersey Shore have to do with telling you what to do with your bees? Learn the deltas, learn what the weather forecast is for your region from a single source, say AccuWeather, and then pay attention to the variations for your particular location. Maybe you're going to notice that what AccuWeather says is always 4 degrees higher than what you actually have going on in the thermometer hanging on the wall outside your house. We think the weather is so important that you have to learn to become zen with it. We took it one step further at our place and bought a weather station. You can kind of do that without doing that if you want. Visit the websites for weather station companies on Weather Underground and look at the maps of neighbors near you that have weather stations. Know that they might be just a touch different, as we've been discussing, but they are in your neighborhood, and that sure is better than the forecast of the nearby city from your local TV station. That is, unless you actually live in the city. A lot of focus on the all-important weather, but there are other factors at play. Again, your local forage can vary from others. Holistically, zones in a region produce similar forage, but you might have 4 locust trees that others do not have, and that makes your example wholly different from some other points of the year. Additionally, the density of hives around you and competition for resources is another factor for some beekeepers to consider. You know, if you look around, you might be surprised to learn how many beekeepers are flying in the radius that your bees fly from your apiary. That's another local factor for you to consider. Why does all this matter? Biologically, bees are sensitive to weather patterns. In themselves, they're tiny weather devices. They can keenly sense wind, barometric pressure, and other weather phenomenon. If a storm is approaching and the weather is changing, you can bet the bees know it. They will return back to their hive if a storm is coming in, or hide somewhere until it blows over, but make no mistake, they know it's coming. If you try to sneak out and, say, add some food to a hive while in a rush to get the job done because you have to leave to go somewhere, and, well, a storm is coming, you might beat the weather, but you are not going to beat the bees. Bees are not partial to you opening the hive when a storm is coming, and they will exhibit defensive tendencies. Ask us how we know. You learn quickly as a beekeeper to avoid working hives when the weather is not suitable. Let's talk about another interesting factor. Cultural ways of thinking are an interesting consideration. If you live in our region, your perception of the temperature for which to open the hives might be no less than 55 degrees for a preference. I'm not going to open the hives, I don't want to chill the bees. If you live in Maine, a 55-degree Fahrenheit day might be a luxury, and they might set the low at 40 degrees culturally, otherwise they'd never open their hives. It is what you know, and we have learned that in different regions, people have different thought processes about different things. Taking this into consideration, this is why you might consider building a network of trusted resources near to you. Consult collectively for how do you do things in your region and talk these things through. We always like to say find a friend in beekeeping. Listen to what they say or make your judgments based on your condition. Both ways are correct, because beekeeping is local. This slide is kind of saying, if in doubt, you can ask us. Please do not turn to Facebook or other bee forums. Sometimes they work, but many times they're going to steer you wrong. Conversations of this nature are especially prone to devolving when the trolls get involved. We have a safe space to ask, and the truth is, if we don't know, we will tell you we don't know and not make something up, and then we're going to go find the answer. But the fact is, we're connected from a network of a bunch of different beekeepers from different zones of the country, and we kind of know what the lay of the land is there from discussing it with them. So you can ask us and we'll try to get you an answer. As we've been saying all along, beekeeping is local, and it makes sense for you to get zen with that and what you have going on to make an input to your management practice plans. This wraps up this lesson, and in the next presentation we will overview beekeeping styles, talk about the obligations to be a good neighbor after that, and making sure that you do your due diligence to adhere to regulations for your locale. And then we're going to go towards some of the final topics that are going to walk you into spring and placement of your bees. As always, this is where we tell you if you have questions, you can ask at our next online session. You can also send an email to the address on the slide. If you're watching from YouTube, you can leave a comment below and we'll do our best to get to your answer. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next lesson.